But yeah, we've got a couple. I'm trying to. It's a little bit mirrored,
Oh, yes. Look at those shelf fungus.
but yeah.
Awesome.
So some stuff we also stencil things out. I've got this one on plants, and then this other one I do on fungi, which I think is more akin to like doing stuff out in the field lately. I kind
Oh,
of keep
spore
like
prints.
I keep like tags in like different locations, and also this is like kind of where I've been like learning more things about fungi lately, and
Great.
I do print them as well.
Cool.
Here we go. Trying to get a good page of it. There we go.
Yeah, definitely getting a good view. Awesome. Wow, that's really cool. I wasn't sure about your nature journaling practice because I didn't see that many posts of your pages on your Instagram. So
Ah,
I wasn't
yes.
totally sure about it. Maybe you could describe like a recent outing that you went on, either foraging or looking for mushrooms or sketching or teaching, like just to give people an idea of what one of your outings or little sessions is like.
Yeah. So this past weekend, I did like this tea walkout with this nonprofit, the Conservation Foundation, and we taught people about medicinal teas and also like ways of drying and herbs in the garden. So we pick stuff from the garden, and then we taught people how to dry them out, and also the different like edible and historical uses of plants.
Nice.
Moving into now the end of this year, going the next year, I'm starting to do more illustrating walks. So showing people kind of how to draw like some of the things, like what are some key features that you can take down in your notebook to be able to go
Mm.
home and identify plants and mushrooms as well.
Yeah, that is always when it's really helpful to have someone like you that really knows about like the plants and the mushrooms, because sometimes nature journalers that don't have like a background in those species might not know what are some of the characteristics that are important to represent accurately, and what are things that you can kind of take more artistic license with, like if you kind of are making certain things up, it's important to get other things right for correct identification, right?
Yeah, like, and I think also a big like I started drawing before I started learning about the uses of plants.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think I came into it with an art lens, and then kind of went back and learned some of the like science of stuff too.
Oh,
So
nice.
I don't know if that directly impact, like I don't know if I'd be able to vocalize like how that may have changed the way that I like draw and like perceive things, but I'd imagine it
Hmm.
has some impact on the way that I not only do it for myself but teach too.
Cool. So that's a great segue into, if you had to describe your teaching style and background for people that don't know anything about your work, how would you describe it?
Um, everything that I do is like very hands-on. So there's a lot of mix of trying to incorporate all the senses. If you touch something, what does it feel like? What does it smell like? And more importantly, how does that relate to the individual person? What
Mm,
I may taste or smell to me is going to be way different than something that you may like. I don't like cucumber, so when I go out and teach, I'm like, I'm probably not gonna like cattails because it tastes like cucumber. But if you like cucumber, this is something that you can note for finding other things that may be more on your palate too. And also
yeah.
like more than the visual too. I think many people are colorblind as well. So I try to
Mm,
incorporate all the senses. Some people may not some people maybe have a disability. Maybe they aren't able to touch what they're able to smell and taste. So I try to incorporate as many senses as I can into teaching it as well.
nice. That's really cool. So um, let's see here, when people, so this panel, I think this nature journaling conference, there's going to be a couple speakers that are focused on conservation, and then there's going to be a bunch of classes that are mostly going to be talking about the art side of nature journaling, and then there's going to be your panel that is going to be talking about the conservation. Why do you well, what kind of message do you want to, because it seems like the conservation part is sometimes we assume, oh, by nature journaling we're contributing something to conservation, but it's not always like shown like what that clear connection is. What's like, if you could if you could only contribute like one thing to the conversation at the conference around conservation, what kind of message around conservation would you want to bring to the whole conference?
Ooh, I think one of the biggest things that's missing about conservation is the missing human element of it. So many
Mm,
times in like both historical books or modern books, there's like this, I don't know, what's the word? It's like this insecurity or like this sadness to be human. It's like man has done all these things to the environment. Man continues to destroy or do these things instead of actively seeing we both equally have the ability to damage and also rebuild the environment as well. And there are many plants that are alive slowly based of our interactions with the environment, or have
mhm,
been widely or more widely distributed because of our impacts to it. And I'm trying to do not only with teaching personally, but hopefully at this panel too, is like the show. Not only do we also eat plants and do things from the environment until we get uses, but also what are the cultural impacts that we have in connection with
mhm,
nature too? Like I think there really needs to be, especially in some parts of academia, a shift on how we interact with the environment, and that we are on this earth for a reason. We're not above or less than. We're equally a part of nature as well. We're like, but it's just a unique spin to it as well. So how can
mhm.
we better interact with the environment and have more of a perspective shift on how we can be actively members of it too?
Yeah, okay, this is perfect because I was kind of predicting this a little bit of this perspective. So let's talk about conservation. And the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is like, um, without giving away my perspective or opinion yet, do you see like foraging and conservation being at odds, or how are those actually?
Mm.
Because I think some people in some places foraging is like you're taking from the environment and picking plants, right?
Hmm.
So,
I think that it's a multifaceted issue, and I think there's multiple people who have different beliefs in how they should go about interacting with it. In a broad, general sense, foraging has been something that us as a human, like Homo sapiens, have been doing for almost all the time that we've been alive on the planet, and I
mhm,
think we are more removed from it. So because of that, we don't have an active hand in contributing and be able to give back. We kind of just go to the grocery store. It's a modern convenience to be able to do that. Um, in terms of figuring out how we interact with the environment, like are they at odds with each other? I think there is a shift now because more people are looking to forage, and I think there is a scarcity mindset going into like I need to go out and forage because I need to be able to eat today. I need to be able to figure these things out. And on some end, I do think foraging can it may be a solution in some areas to be able to fix some of like the food desert or like areas where there is food scarcity. I think going into it with the scarcity mindset that I need to forage because there won't be food elsewhere is bad, or not necessarily bad, but it leaves a lot of room for error.
mhm,
Along with going into it, more people are commercializing foraging as well. There are
mhm,
people who want to forage and find new kinds of foods that you can make and cook. There are some more people who are wanting to cook with wild foods because they have a taste that are less commercialized as well. And there's a
mhm,
need to a want for people to go out and commercialize it and sell it and harvest from it as well. And
mhm.
that's has multiple different perspectives on it too.
Yeah.
um, I think generally speaking, people, if you as an individual go out and forage, that there is kind of a responsibility you have to be able to give back as well. The times where
Mhm,
I do forage plants like milkweed or something, I'll make sure that I plant more of it as well in certain
mhm,
areas. Or being conscious of if I do take something, I do try to give something back in the same space.
mhm,
Pawpaw is one of the reasons why they kind of expanded their range is because natives intentionally plant them in certain
mhm.
areas, or
Yeah.
people today will intentionally pollinate them. So then, do we are we kind of responsible for the plant living in that space too? And I don't know. There's a lot of room for discussion in it, but in a positive, and I think I try to lane more on the positive end of it. I think foraging is going to benefit us as we move forward, and how more laws and things are changing with it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'm definitely in the camp of thinking that we we have impacts on nature and wild spaces no matter what we do. And
Hmm.
so, like you said, if you buy something at the grocery store, it's not like you're disconnected from Earth's ecosystems. It's like that food was grown somewhere.
Yes.
There were choices made, there were impacts made on the environment, there were impacts made on animals, plants, water, soil. And so I think that the closer we are to those choices, the better decisions we can make. Because if you're picking it from somewhere, like I've seen in your videos where you're picking stuff like in places like it's right in front of you, then sorry, I just noticed there's like water dripping down from the ceiling in the co-working place where I am. If you're closer, you can make better decisions, and if you're far away, it's hard to know what's happening over there. So this is something I run into a lot. Is it seems like sometimes there's a really strong mentality of like hands off conservation, or even like a fear of touching nature. And it seems to me that a lot of people these days think that they're either going to hurt nature if they touch it, or nature's going to hurt them. What do you think about that, and how do you think we can kind of move beyond that fear of touching nature, or even like if you're putting it into your body?
I think personally, on like a personal level, or like some of the spaces I've entered, I think some of the hands-off approach, at least in spaces of academia or people who've had prior experience, is coming from an older generation of conservationists, where they think
Hmm.
that there needs to be a hands-off approach. I remember a recent example of this is around the Chicagoland area. We have the Morton Arboretum, and they were trying to remove invasive plants from the area that there are people that are trying to remove invasive plants from the area that are affecting the environment. And when they cut those trees down, generally sometimes people see trees as a good thing. Like, aren't trees supposed to be a good thing? Why are you cutting those trees down? And it's like it's for ideally the things that we're seeing that it's better for the environment. So I think there is people are getting like glimpses into what conservation is or how we're supposed to be able to interact with the environment, and I think it just becomes of more awareness and more exposure for people, both for eating things and for like conservation as well. Or like you have people try things like, you get that from outside, where'd you get that? And it's
Yeah.
like this apprehensive. I think we're really far removed from that too. I think the more experience that people see, okay, I'm growing this, I see all the different changes that it happens, the more comfortable you get with it. And I think that's definitely been the case for me as I've come into learning this for myself.
Yeah, I had an experience. I don't have that much experience like in the Midwest or the East Coast or anything like that, but I went a couple years ago to DC to visit my sister. And like I know some families, plant families and whatnot, and can kind of identify a fair number of like edible things. And it was like summertime, and there was tons of edible stuff, and I was with my sister and her two little kids, and my sister told me, you're not allowed to eat. She saw me starting to pick some. There was like service berries and like wild plums and mulberries, and she's like, you're not allowed to pick and eat any like wild foods in front of my children. And I was like thinking about that for a while, because it's just crazy that people are so afraid of food that comes from outside, that's not from the grocery store.
Man, that's really interesting too. Like, I don't know. I think I'm truthfully, I think I'm still trying to figure out and what the apprehensive is for other people as well. I know some people, at least I can bring in like a cultural aspect. People of color, black people from the South who are moving north, who wanted to get away from farming. There's a need to want to get out of
Hmm.
that because there's a classism thing. I
Hmm.
think your wealth bracket and how much like the class is like also a part of foraging. I think sometimes people view foraging as something that's less than,
Hmm.
and instead of something that anybody can do. Um, so I think there's like kind of an apprehensive, like, well, we did farming in the past. Why do I want to get into? Why do I want to pick stuff outside when I can just go get it? I don't want to have to do that. Um, oh man, I think moving into like newer things today, it's like, how do we get people to try some of the things? And I think what's been working is like some people who are in the space who are doing like forage and feast style things, where they forage some things and prepare them. I think once people see, oh, this is the end product of what you get from this, oh, this came from that, there's so many. There's like we have a lot. They plant a lot of honey locust trees around by us. And I've done nature walks where I've said, if you ever seen like xanthan or like locust bean gum in your ice cream, that comes from honey locust trees. People are like,
Mm,
oh. And then there's like the connection. It's like, okay, this comes from a source. This comes from somewhere. And
hmm
I don't know. I think it's like making what how do people have that personal connection to what we find outside?
Yeah, it seems like helping forge really like less abstract but like more direct connections is one of the main themes in your education.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say that
Cool.
it's easier to kind of bring people in that space. Or
Hmm.
it's I think I'm very passionate about this, and there's also like people were like, oh, this is something that's really cool. I didn't even know this is something you could do. Wasn't aware, and then now people are interested because I didn't know about some of these plants that are useful too, or like why
Hmm.
aren't these things being shown or taught about as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
there's also like a removed. The people are so far removed. Like there's been a couple of generations now where people haven't had to go outside to
Hmm.
be able to grow their own food or garden. So I think it's just lack of exposure.
Hmm. Cool. Okay, so another thing, I kind of have like a diverse mixture of weird sort of questions here, but this is something that comes up, and it's come up at previous of these conferences. Just to put it out there, you probably already figured this out, but like the nature journaling community in general so far is not super diverse. Like it's gotten more diverse, but like if I offer a nature journaling class here where I'm currently living in Sonoma County, it's near San Francisco Bay Area, it's usually not a super diverse group of people. And it's known that there's issues with like conservation and access and things like that. Do you have any thoughts about this, or from your experience, like about the balance between like conservation and access, and how sometimes, I mean, you alluded a little bit to some of the complexities around African American families moving from the south to the north and trying to be a little bit more removed from the associations and stigmas of foraging and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts around conservation and access and inclusion and things like that?
I I think to bring this really to the main idea that it's a class thing, and unfortunately, because of the
Mm,
history in this country, that affects a lot of Black people in the country.
mhm,
Or I think it's like a thing attend to like because of the history of that I think it affects Black people more because of the history that happened. Um, in terms of access, I think just if you have more leisure time, if people are growing in environments that are really hostile or high crime environments where they are focusing on getting food on the table in general or being able to afford those things or have to work 9 to 5s, like really grinding to be able to bring money home and support a family, you don't really have the time to be able to go out and prepare a lot of these things. I think
mhm,
foraging and being able to process food and worry about conservation takes a lot of time.
mhm,
This is our first year being able to really garden, and it's a lot of work to be able to forage, process all these things, and then also that's just for being able to bring food to the table. Let alone thinking about how does this affect the environment too.
mhm,
Um, and I think there's just more, maybe potentially more people who are white have the access to in the more leisure time to be able to focus on conservation and be able to worry about how they impact the environment. And it also affects people. What about people who do worry about conservation? What to say? What if you have people who are abroad in like let's say Indonesia who are affecting the environment, but they are locked in to be able to do things that are negatively impacted to be able to support themselves.
mhm,
Monoculture, farming abroad. If we were to be able to grow all of our food here in this country and be able to do it in like small community level, what happens to other countries'
yeah.
GDPs who rely on that? We need to really think that this is a global, this affects everyone and it's all connected in some way. There's a rippling effect. So
Mhm,
it's a really challenging thing to really to navigate through.
mhm,
But I think it's starting to change because there's more of a need for people to be able to do it in general. And I think there's more with a lot of things, maybe social media as well, different museums. I know Illinois recently got some more grant money to focus them on some of their like park districts in some of the counties. So I think there's more funding and recognition, especially post pandemic, for people caring about the environment. So I'm definitely seeing a lot more different faces entering the space too, and I think people, not just like myself, but other people who maybe have gotten into academia, who are leading the way for other
Mhm.
people to come in and like, okay, this is a path that I can go down.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like that is a really important, the visibility, and knowing what's possible. Um, Also is, yeah. Those are all really good points. Okay, so what about art and conservation? How do you see the interest? You mentioned, like you have a background in acting and improv and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different forms of art, but like, how do you see art and conservation connecting?
Mm, ooh, I think. Mm, to give an example, I think maybe the bringing it back potentially to the culture of it. Like there's basket weaving, right? I think when
Mm.
people are able to make things from art, if we get a lot of our, some people get like maybe dyes or paint pigments or things like that from the environment. That once we start to see the value and where these things come from, there's more of a place. Hold on, okay, I want to conserve these areas because I want to continue to do these things. Or where do we get our paper from, looking at how conservation affects the way that we create art as well as like some of the ways that the things that people produce. There's so many amazing artists that I see on Instagram and TikTok who, I mean, the amount of work, not only the volume of work they produce, but just a range of different multimedia that they do.
Mm.
I think it is an explosion of like the field of like botany online. And I hope
Mhm.
I'm answering your question too, and I'm not.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's no, it's all good. Okay, cool. I think so. That was sort of my like my mixture bag of questions about the conservation panel and stuff like that. So I do have some other questions that are more about like your background, the Wild Wonder, like if you what classes you're planning on taking, and then we've got a lightning round coming up with some just fun questions, and then some other like personal questions and closing questions. But let's go to Wild Wonder. So, have you been to the Wild Wonder conference before as an attendee or anything?
I have not. I've heard Wild Wonder being thrown around even before maybe like in the past year before
Oh,
I
okay.
got brought on to do the panel. And I would see, I don't know his name, but he's a birder and he's involved. I'm really sorry if I don't remember.
John Muir Laws.
Yes. I
Okay,
would
yeah.
see some of his artwork around. I'm like, oh, there's there's a space for artists to draw about nature. But I didn't really know too much about it. So it's really cool to like see stuff like more people get into this space too.
Cool. Are you planning on, since you're presenting in one of the panels, are you also planning on taking some classes or attending any of the like keynotes or anything like that?
I'd love to. I don't know if I have didn't know if there was any classes going on around the same time. There are classes going on as well. I probably will. Like
Okay.
I try to always view myself as a student too, regardless of where I'm at. Especially online, I really don't want to come. I don't say that I'm an expert, that I know what I'm doing. This is a process that I'm learning just as much as the people who are watching are. So if there's any opportunity for me to learn something new or hone in and better my craft, I'm gonna take advantage of that.
Cool. Yeah, I think learning is always a two-way street, and it's like lifelong learning is a major value of mine. Okay, so that leads to my next question, which is, how do you balance teaching with learning?
Mm. I'd say, oh, I don't know. I think I was talking to my sister about this recently, and it's like I think I only teach 60% of what I know, and that other 40% I'm still learning and adding information onto.
Mm.
And I think I kind of sit in a unique space because I was able to get a little bit of traction online in like a relatively short amount of time. It's both equally exciting as it is scary. A lot of it, of the rapid growth, I think, has been from me maybe posting a video about something that people are like, oh, have you heard about this thing that you could do with it? Or oh, this like
Mm.
I'm from the Netherlands and they call this plant this, and my grandma used to use it this way. And there's
Mm.
all these different questions that people would ask that I don't know the answers to. It's like, okay, what are some things that maybe, because there's some videos in my early posts that I did that I may have gotten some things wrong as well. It's like, okay, what things did I get wrong, or what questions that people have that I don't know, and I can kind of write these
Mm.
questions out in a spreadsheet, and then I would go through and figure and just do research that way.
Oh,
There's
wow.
so there's times of just drawing and then answering questions and then really trying to better myself.
Hmm.
And to bring this back to one of the questions you mentioned earlier about bringing more people of color in the space, I think there's also a pressure in the Black community as well to be able. You're concerned about how you're perceived. I think there's much
Hmm.
more scrutiny on my educational background because I've sit in this space versus somebody else.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more hoops that people have to go over to be able to prove themselves that you know this. And I think
Hmm.
especially since that I didn't go to get higher education. I went to trade school for a year and then have been all self-taught drawing and
Hmm.
learning this on my own. So I think
Yeah.
there's even more of a push like, okay, I need to know these things and make sure that I'm on top of that my information is right.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. And I think what's her name? Alexis Nicole, Black Forager.
Mm-hmm.
She posts stuff a lot about like the double standards that exist, and just like how, people will be asking her like, did you have permission to go on that property, or stuff like that, that like, if she was some blonde chick or whatever, like Instagramming in some forest, like people probably wouldn't ask that question. So yeah.
There's some overlap in that I'll add to really quick. I think she mentioned too that part of the reason of dressing like that too is because you can kind of get profiled as a forager. I do genuinely dress like this, but I will, still like the way that I present on social media. I do forage like that out. I don't know if it would be as safe if I go to certain areas in like a hoodie and sweatpants to be able
Yeah,
to forage
yeah,
and draw.
exactly. Yeah, I interviewed I mean, we've had a couple of people. I think the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, there's a lot of improvements, and it's a complex issue, but like they're trying to represent more diversity. And we've had a couple African American birders and stuff in the past, and all of the stuff around like being a black birder is super crazy. And like, showing up somewhere with like binoculars and not feeling safe, it's a crazy topic. um and I think for a lot of the nature journaling community, it's good to just at least be aware that this is something that is happening, because if you don't have that personal experience, you might not realize, that that's an issue that's happening out there.
Yeah, and I think I'd even go one step further. It really depends on where you are. I'm fortunate enough to be not only to be foraging in not only the Midwest but Illinois, which for the most part I haven't really run into too many issues. I'd say this more sits within some portions of academia, or if I go to some preserves that are like or some areas where I'm like just doing journaling. It's like, oh well, what are you doing over here? And
Right.
things like in that space. Also, too, that it's kind of safer too. We don't have like bears or anything in the state, so it's kind of like like the nature part of it is like, okay, I don't have to worry about anything. We may have like a coyote or two, but like you don't have to worry about like being out foraging in like California or something like that.
Yeah. I just wanted to say hi to Ivea is here. Ivea is going to be in the panel with you. So Ivea is a personal friend of mine, and she's also a really cool nature journaler. She does a bunch of restoration work in the San Francisco area. So I just saw she popped into the chat, so wanted to say hi. But yeah, she's going to be in that panel with you at Wild Wonder. So, and hopefully I'll get to interview her. She's been on the show a bunch of times.
Oh,
So
hi.
yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. So, let's see, where was I at? Okay, let's get some I have some questions sort of about how you got started and everything like that. And let's start with a sort of like a fun one that's intended to be fun, but like, what did 9-year-old Shane want to do?
Um, it was not expecting this at all. I think I was looking to maybe be like an engineer or an actor. Because my grandpa was an engineer. He used to do what's it called? It's like when you I can't. Why am I blanking at the name? It's you have like one of those architecture boards. You're doing like stenciling. He was
Oh,
like he like
nice.
he would do hand drafting. He was a
Oh wow.
drafter for engineering trains, and he would do like
Wow.
all the diesel and freight cars and stuff. So when I was younger, him and my dad, we were like, there's like Thomas conventions and stuff. I was really into that when I was like 4, like around that time, and I was like, oh, this is something. Maybe I want to be an engineer, and like drive trains for a living. And then I was like, oh, that requires a lot of math, and I never really was into some parts of school like that. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do engineering. And then it morphed into me wanting to do acting because me and my mom are movie buffs and we love watching movies. And I was like, oh, maybe I want to be an actor. So I did a couple somewhere out there. There's some really, I think are cringe, like movies or like a couple commercials that I'm in, like
Oh really?
from middle school and early high school. And then I was like, the pandemic hit with doing that, and I was able to get a little bit of work. And then I was like, man, I don't really. And I realized I wasn't passionate about it. I liked it, but I wasn't passionate about it. Like if I was passionate, I would be practicing lines. I would be watching more movies. I'd really be honing the craft. So I guess it was a few. I wanted to do a lot of acting, and I think that like for doing it is still there, and I think that maybe transfers over. Like kind of as a blend of what I do now.
Yeah. Cool. So, how did you get started? When did you get into plants?
Um, the intensity that it has been is probably in the past 3 4 years. But we've always been outside. Like I could split time between the suburbs of Chicago and the city. So I was in Boy Scouts when I was younger. I used to go to summer camp, and both me and my sister did that. So I think there was exposure to it, but it wasn't really like I want to learn plants. I think the catalyst for it was like 3 or 4 years ago, and I already was drawing and had an interest in drawing and doing artwork. And there is somebody on YouTube, I think Atomic Shrimp, that would
Huh.
forage and then also like, how do I live off a pound a day? And he would incorporate foraging into it. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that that's something that you could do. The seed I think may have been planted there. On top of my sister wanting to do permaculture at the time, like sustainable gardening. So I think there was like different like messages to be able to do it. And I was like, one day I was like, let me just start learning stuff in the garden. Well, not the garden, but we didn't have a garden at the time. It was just an open, bare grass lawn. But like, what weeds are growing through that I can learn about?
Yeah.
So I would draw like black medic or clovers. We had some sumac growing in our yard, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I researched sumac, like it's edible. And then I was like, that was like the first thing that I tried. And I tried June berries after that and started drawing the things that I would learn and take notes on the environment, like the weather. And I don't even think I was conscious that it was nature journaling at first. I think
Uh huh.
it kind of like morphed into it. And then I was like, okay, I haven't died yet. I tried a couple things. Maybe do some in-person classes. So I did some in-person. There's another forager around Chicago that had a plant walk who saw my illustrations, and he also was doing different walks. And I was like, wait, he's teaching people about plants for a living? That's so cool. And then I think that really is like, okay, let's do this.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I started posting, and then I didn't know there was a whole community of people like Sam Thayer, Lex Nicole, a whole bunch of people, other foragers who were posting online. So I started posting and learning stuff that way. And I'd say it's kind of morphed into becoming the Wild Dryad.
Cool. All right. Well, now's a perfect time for me to put up your website. You've got some classes coming up, right? You said so. Here, let's put this. People can find out about your classes there, thewilddryad.com. Can you tell us a little about some of your upcoming classes?
Yeah, so I kind of took a little bit of a break a little bit recently. I was like, let me take a moment. But now I was like, take a break during summer. Now it's for mushroom season.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of like fall wave of nature walks that I'm doing around the Chicago and some of the surrounding suburbs is going to be focused on urban foraging and also mushrooms that come up in the fall. A lot of the big like edible mushrooms that people get really excited about, like chicken of the woods, head of the woods, giant puffballs. All these things are going to be coming up. So I mean, it's really excited to show people how to recognize these mushrooms and also potentially what to do with them, how you prepare them as well. I'm
Nice.
really excited about it. So these are planned all the way going on out until October as of right now, and then maybe after that we'll roll out some more. Maybe even do maybe some December ones for making cordage or doing some
Mm.
kind of foraging style walk that way. But I think it's a little cold, and some people are put off by the cold, which I don't blame them. I'm from Chicago, but I don't like the cold. I don't like the cold either.
Cool. It's really cool to talk to someone that does foraging and nature journaling, because there's not always that. I don't always see that overlap. So that's really cool that you're going to be at the conference this year. I think that the it sounds like the way you were using it is such a cool example of how it can be a learning tool. And I also think that recipes and cooking are perfect things to. I mean, maybe you're gonna get some your pages are gonna get a little messy, or you might take longer to make a recipe, but showing the process of a recipe in a nature journal can be really fun, and really showing the recipe can be really interesting as well. So
You
um
bring up a good point with that too. Like I do think that like as I was like went on some of the walks, some of the things I was teaching about, I knew some of the book knowledge of stuff, but I didn't have the hands-on approach. So I think that
mm,
second like in between year of me learning, I'm like everything that I talk about, I want to have experience before.
mm,
I want to try it. So then I think the first year was like learning what is this plant? How is it? How was it used? And then let me try it and see how it
mm.
goes. I think you need that hands-on experience to really sink in and put it into memory on top of the drawing and note taking as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's something I'm often wonder about is it in some ways the nature journaling is a little bit of a it's a little bit abstracted interaction with nature, and eating something is the most physical direct way that you can interact with nature, right? You're turning it into yourself. You're turning it into your body, basically. um, so I think sometimes as a nature journal, when I'm nature journaling, I do think it helps me connect with nature, but sometimes I think there's other ways to connect with nature that are a little bit more primal, and it's good to balance them or combine them or something. So
Yeah.
okay, last question about your work and stuff. Could you talk a little bit about? I mean, I'm learning a lot more about you in this conversation, but at first, mainly I saw your Instagram and stuff like that, which I'll put up here for people who don't know. You have a pretty large number of followers on Instagram. Could you tell us a little bit about the ecosystem of plant influencers and forager influencers? I know it's a huge thing, and I follow some people, and it's just interesting to see that world from the outside. I've posted random stuff about eating plants, or when I worked in a nursery about plants on my Instagram, but it's not my main focus. So I'm just curious if you could tell us about what that world and ecosystem is like at all.
Do you mean what it's like for posting on my end, or what like the community is like abroad?
Or I guess just what it's like from your perspective, and how it feels to be. I mean, you have uh what 213,000 followers on Instagram. So what is it like posting about plants, and how you probably get so many messages and stuff too. How do you what is that like?
I think it's very. I want to be upfront. That it's very surreal, and I don't think it's still fully set in yet. I don't think I really see it transfer over until I've done walks and people are like, oh my gosh, I've seen like some of your stuff, or I've done like some other festivals or been in nature spaces. You're like, oh my gosh, I've seen some of your stuff before, and it's like, okay, I think people are watching what you're doing. I think it's maybe much more not selective, but I think I put a little bit more care into what I post and making sure the
Mm,
information that I do post is accurate. um, I do think that it's a blooming community. There's so many more people who are posting about foraging and wanting to start leading nature walks outside too and do that same thing. It's like people can talk about plants and also teach people as well.
mhm.
I think it's flourishing. A lot more people are wanting to post and learn about plants, and some people who never knew about them at all are getting exposed to it. Um, but it's there's so many different cool people that I've had been fortunate enough to meet who are also doing it. But I think I it doesn't sometimes it doesn't translate to what you do online to what you do. Like
Mm,
I don't forage full time for eating and being able to do things. I know some people are in it that deep to be able to do it. And although that would be nice, there's also I do sometimes I'll go to Aldi or something to be able to get forage stuff that way too.
mm,
So like, I think there's like trying to figure out like, okay, and then I think there's more of a focus on what's my drive in this? Because at
mm-hmm,
first it was passion about, I still was very passionate about it. I wasn't in this to be able to teach and make money. I didn't even know that was an avenue. This is just something I was passionate in and wanted to share with other people. So I think now, for me personally, I'm valuing the education aspect of it. Like, how can
mm-hmm,
people learn about these things, and how can I use this audience now? Well, not use, but also work with the audience rather
mm-hmm,
to be able to teach people and educate people, and then have it be like a cyclical flow.
mm-hmm,
I'd say a lot of what I've learned has also been from the community as well, like telling me like, oh, you can do this, or like maybe it would be easier if you tried doing something else to
mm-hmm.
process it this way.
Uh-huh.
So I think the creators who do have, I think creators who are foraging and do have a platform and have garnered an audience are kind, and in some ways, the vessel to be able to project out the
Yeah.
information. But I feel like we're all learning. We're all being able to do this and give back information. So I feel like it's a really, it goes back and forth. It's a really balanced, like I think, ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see here. Oh, wait. Can you make a lightning sound?
uh, boom.
Nice. All right. Okay, so let me make this other one go away. I think everybody got your Instagram. Okay, so the first ones are just they're all supposed to be kind of fast answers, but the first ones are either like yes or no or just one word answers. I always ask people about coffee. So, is there any good forageable substitute to coffee in North America?
Dandelion or chicory?
Okay, great. That segues into the next one. Asteraceae or Poaceae?
Asteraceae.
Okay, yeah, me too. Um, in do you prefer in-person teaching or online teaching?
In person.
Do you like hiking alone or with other people?
Alone.
Everybody always I mean, I usually ask like, do you like nature journaling alone or with other people? And people are usually alone. Does your family understand your work?
Yes.
Nice. Are you a perfectionist?
Yes.
Botany or mycology?
Botany.
Ink or graphite?
Ink.
When it comes to art supplies, do you maximize or minimize?
Minimize.
In nature, do you like big picture stuff or micro stuff?
Both.
Fast or slow?
Slow.
What face do you make when someone walks up to you and says, wild plants are dangerous? All right, so now I've got a couple sort of longer ones here. If you could go foraging or nature journaling, either one, with a person from history, any historical figure, who would you want to go out there with?
That's a great question. Oh. See, there's some niche pockets that I could. Oh man, can I give two?
Sure, why not?
I would say I would say potentially because I don't know much. I think it's oversimplified. It's George Washington Carver. I
Mm-hmm.
think people got associated with peanut butter, even though he did
Yeah.
invent peanut butter. Just I want to like the fact that he changed the way that we view farming is really cool. The second person is a botanist, Nicholas Flamel, who would write things against like his contemporaries, not against it, but he'd be like, well, he made like medicine readily available. He would get things from academia and like transcribe and like make it accessible to people. And he also,
Oh.
if you haven't heard, I would recommend reading into it. But he's also a was a astrologist. He was an
Oh.
astrologist and a botanist. So like he would fuse the two together and would do like doctrine of signatures and stuff. So he
Oh,
was like, if a
interesting.
plant looked like a brain, it's like, oh, it must be used to treat the brain. And if you're a cancer, you should take this medicine. So it's like it's very interesting, and I think especially with more people getting into astrology, it's interesting to see people were maybe in that space before. Whether the plants help people or not, I think it's really cool to see would have seen like the process in that and figuring those things out.
Yeah, I'll look him up. And I'll have to refresh my George Washington Carver history also. Okay, so if you were going to be stuck on a deserted island and all of your survival supplies were taken care of, what art supplies would you? Oh, if you can only bring 5 art supplies, what 5 art supplies would you bring with you?
A nice mechanical pencil.
Okay.
I like a good fine liner, so like
Mm-hmm.
a micron pen. Um, uh, a compass,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
a solid notebook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at 4,
Yeah.
and I think one of those like Play-Doh erasers. They would give me
Okay.
something to
Cool.
do, and I'd be able to erase.
All right, you are sort of a minimalist because some people really stress out about that question. Okay, if there was a foraging Olympics, which event would you compete in?
Oh, huh. Um, best best berry, best fruit.
Okay, all right, finding like the best one. I was just picking blackberries yesterday, and it could be a competition of who can find the best one. That would be a good one. Okay, cool. And then my last question for the lightning round is which fictional character, it could be from sci-fi, fantasy, children's books, Marvel movies, whatever, which fictional character would be the best at foraging?
Mm, mm, um, I feel like I've had this like thought about that, and I haven't. Let me think. Why am I can't blank at anything. I haven't like I is this, I don't really I haven't
It's
watched the
not the
movie.
kind of question you get asked every day. So if you know if it's not easy to come up with an idea, then that's
Doctor
normal.
Who?
Okay. All
How
right.
about Doctor Who?
Sure. Great. All right. Good job in the lightning round. Okay, cool. So last couple of questions here to close out. Wait, hold on. Evea definitely agreed. Evea definitely agreed about Asteraceae or Poaceae. She makes some cool videos on YouTube about plants and ethnobotany and stuff like that. So she definitely can geek out on the plant families. All right, so how about your Indonesia trip? Could you say a little bit about your trip to Indonesia?
Oh yes. So that was the alternative that I had to going to college.
Good choice. Good choice.
So I was like, do I want to be in student loan debt, or do I want to save? I saved up over the course of like I worked since I was 15, so I was just saving up money to be, which I'm very fortunate to be able to do. I know not. This is why I value giving the education back. Like I want to carve anyway. But I saved up and was able to go. So after I went to trade school for a little bit, that following in January, I left January 6th of man, that was last year now. And I was gone for 3 months. The first 2.5 months, I was in Bali, in Ubud, which is like this cultural town in Bali. And also, I went to Thailand, Singapore, and I think and there was 2 cities in Thailand, and then there was Singapore. So I was
Mm,
able to see the Singapore like botanic garden,
whoa.
which was beautiful. I mean, I have a different nature journal that I had for abroad at the time, and I haven't even cracked into it. I didn't take the time to research in the wintertime. Haven't cracked into it yet. So in Bali, I learned some historical plants, and this was like kind of through proxy of learning, like meeting different like local people, how they use plants, some of the plants that they use, and like some of the different Indonesian names for some of the plants there. It was informal, so I wasn't doing any research studies or doing anything, but it was the same thing that I did at home, drawing, figuring out. It was just
Mhm.
learning about all the different plants that I could think. If it was something different, I took a picture of it or drew it in the field and like, let me learn what this is. And then I would, if locals knew something about it, I was able to learn a little bit by
Wow.
proxy too.
That sounds cool. I've never been. Indonesia is on my wish list of places to go. So really want to get there. Okay.
Can I add something really
Yeah.
interesting to that? I have a little antidote. It was also the first time learning. Unlike mushrooms, there's some tropical fruit that you have to be eat in moderation, and you can't mix with alcohol.
Mm.
Shane did not know this. Durian is supposedly is one of those fruits, whether it be the smell or actually something that you eat from doing it. The drinking age was 18 in Indonesia. Shane had a little bit of alcohol in Indonesia, and also had some durian in the same like small window of each other, and had some of the worst food poisoning of my
Whoa! I
entire
didn't
life.
know that.
It's
Wow.
made me much more conscious of, if you are trying tropical fruit, not whether it be plants or mushrooms, try a little bit and see how your body reacts to it, and also don't drink alcohol within a 48-hour window of
Okay, I wanted to have a durian party where I get together a group of people and we get like some durian and then like nature journal it, taste it and describe it. And I was definitely planning on having like some mixed drinks or wines or whatever, but now maybe I'm gonna have to cancel that. I also did a live video where I was nature journaling a dragon fruit, um, and I ended up eating the whole. I ate the whole dragon fruit, and they definitely can be like a laxative, especially if you eat
oh.
like a whole one. And I definitely the next day was having some interesting bowel movements, but um, so I can relate to that one. All right. Okay. My last question to close things out here is, if you could do like a dream, you have like this big, you've built a big platform and a big audience and everything. And like, if you could do like a dream project, what would your dream project be?
Mm. I would love to be able to do. I have this concept kicking around of like doing permaculture but mixed with native plants. And I'd love to be able to like do like, oh, I'm pointing that like I feel like forager garden has maybe been tossed around before, but this is the idea of being able to have
Mm,
a garden that uses native plants but also uses the principles of permaculture, and being able to work with maybe native families that are in an area and being able to grow things and like have them work with each other in that environment. Ideally, be able to maybe have some educational hub where people can learn and maybe even give back and do internships or
mm,
do like apprenticeships where people who are in my space who maybe I still don't feel like I have a clear path. People who feel like they don't have a clear path but wanting to get in a nature space can get some kind of licensing or education to
mhm,
be able to help them do something that's less expensive and also gives them the tools they need to be able to go into whatever path they want to get into.
mhm. Cool. That sounds great. All right, Shane. Well, thank you so much for making the time to be on the show. I can't wait for your panel. Oh, and one other thing,
Yes.
you probably already learned about this, but Ivea is actually the host of it. But during the conference, there's these sessions during lunchtime, like Pacific Coast lunchtime, where
Mm-hmm.
everybody can get together. It's called Pencil Miles and Chill. Everybody can get together and like there's breakout rooms and people can host breakout rooms about different topics and there can be actual conversations. So it's my number one tip for the conference actually is that those aren't to be missed. Like I'd rather miss classes and go to these because you can have like really interesting conversations come up. So I'm not just doing it because Ivea's in the live chat, but I'm doing it because it's one of my top tips for the conference. And there could be some really interesting conversations in there about some of like your interests and stuff. So
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just so many cool, like, this still feels surreal. I'm meeting so many different cool people with different backgrounds and stuff. And it's interesting seeing how different people got into this space too. So it's fun
yeah,
learning like the different like parts of it too. Like I'll
definitely.
definitely like get connected with people for it when it comes around for the panel.
Yeah, cool. All right, Shane, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody watching at home. All right, see you
Yeah,
all later.
y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye.